Welcome and welcome back to the Marketing Made Inclusive podcast. We have Jess Hellens on the podcast, who is the founder of Wild and has been here before when we went on a tangent of a rabbit hole about period marketing. Definitely recommend checking that one out. We had a good debate. However, Jess, for the individuals who may not have heard that podcast or may not know you, please tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Jess. I'm the founder of Wild Coworking, which is a virtual kind of hybrid community of women and non-binary people in business, or self-employed women and non-binary people. I think you're going to ask me about the kind of background of Wild, so I won't go into that too much, but yeah, we're a hybrid in that we primarily hang out together online, co-work together online, do goal setting sessions, workshops, all of that, all on Zoom. But we also have in-person meetups in London, Bristol, Frome, and then other areas that I'm looking for ambassadors in. So anyway, we're a hybrid. We're virtual and we're in person. A fusion.
A fusion. I love it. And I wanted to talk to Jess about Wild because Jess doesn't know this, but Wild and Wild's marketing have been on my case study board for a little while. And I've been meaning to talk to her about it. I'm just like, how can I approach my friend and tell her I want to make her a case study? But instead, I'm going to ask her to be on my podcast. No,
Okay.
but the marketing for Wild is very fascinating. And I think Jess has heard the what is inclusive marketing question before. So I wanted to shift it and ask you, what does an inclusive community mean to you?
It's wild, basically, which of course I'll explain that. Inclusive to me, and I think if people don't work in our kind of spaces, as in a space for a space for holding a community, or a community holding space for minorities or marginalized groups, then they might think that a community for self-employed women and non-binary people might be exclusive and not inclusive, which I've definitely come up against that conversation and that question when I was first setting up Wild. Thankfully, times have changed a tiny bit in that people realise how important it is for these safe spaces, both online and in real life. In order for us to, I guess, gain a bit of equality, but that is so complex, and that is we know that it's not just about if we provide a platform for these people, we're good, we want to be equal with the oppressor. That is all very complex, but essentially Wild is an inclusive community, even though it's for self-employed women and non-binary people, because I wanted it to be. And it's great that it's me that owns it. But how you bring those people together, because I get asked that a lot as well. How do you find those people? And there's two levels to marketing your own personal brand. And at the beginning, it was really, really hard to do my own marketing because I'm a marketing person, and it's always hard to do your own stuff. But now I've kind of got through that, and I realized that being myself is absolutely the most important thing. And I genuinely believe in that whatever you put out there, you bring back in. And I think that goes for brands as well, that's kind of old-fashioned or traditional marketing technique, is if you represent, you bring those people or whatever you're trying to market back into your business.
But I'm curious to know, because I am part of Wild and I've seen the members, and even in your description of it, it's for women and non-binary people.
Yeah.
As far as I know yourself, you're not non-binary. So how do you market your personal brand and make a non-binary person feel included and feel like they can approach you? Because I'm just going to come out with my bias up front.
Yeah.
Communities for women especially when there's a white woman leading it, tend to have a certain kind of zhuzh of I'm a mommy blogger and I am going to wear leggings and we're going to have $50 lattes and we're all going to sell courses about how, I don't know, herbal essence can change your life. I have no issue with herbal essence, do not sue me. But that's the kind of, anytime I hear communities like that, that's the imagery that comes in my mind. So
Yeah.
having a tagline that includes that and is trying to put that out there, but you're also the face of it, I imagine it's quite difficult to market.
Yeah, it has been really difficult in that I wanted to be inclusive, and I'm very aware of me being a white woman from the of course I know what I am, but as in like I know that if I am I'm not like that. That's the thing. I think it's because I'm not that leggings wearing £10 latte person. No shade, because I love a takeaway coffee and
A
I love
great coffee.
Pilates,
There you
but
go.
I'm not that like. I mean, I think the difference is that from the very beginning, I was like, I don't want it to become that because that's part of the patriarchy. That's part of the racist patriarchy. That
Mm.
is like peak white feminism. And it's so easy for me to like, capitalism makes it, you know, it doesn't give you much option
Mhm.
other than really going for like the path of least resistance
Mhm.
and not making a change, and having a purpose-led business that wants to make a change. Like Wild, I want to change the business landscape. Like that's what I've always wanted to do, because I don't want to keep going to networking events that are full of white men in clippy cloppy shoes. That's why I started it.
Hold on, wait. Clippy cloppy
You
shoe.
know what I mean? The grey suits and the clippy cloppy shoes, and they're like super pointy,
Pointed and shiny. Why are they so
so
shiny?
shiny. But they've got like watches, but they're quite loose watches, and they might have like crumbs from the bacon back down them. Like,
This is a very detailed persona, not thinking of anyone specific.
you know exactly what I mean, though. Those ones that are like, if you go to a networking event, they're a bit sweaty and quite red, and don't respect you and would never expect you to own a business.
They ask you, who do you work for?
Oh, the amount of times, like, oh, who do you work for? Myself. Oh, right, what is it that you do? Like it's
Mhm.
suddenly you're like feel like a schoolgirl. Well, that's my experience. But anyway, we're digressing again. Sorry
Sorry.
about that.
You're saying Weil is on a mission to not be that. So you're not, so when you're creating your persona, you have that list of what it's not. And it's not
Yeah.
clippy copy shoes, suits, and crumbs on your chest.
Yeah.
Unless you want crumbs on your chest, but yeah.
I mean, no shade. Like I've got crumbs on me most of the time. So it's just mainly that I didn't want it to become this like classic traditional business networking where we like have business breakfast and men were there,
Mm.
because that's not a space that I was enjoying. I didn't feel accepted. I felt underestimated. The amount of times that I've been underestimated as a business owner is shit, and it's been too often, and I was really frustrated with it. And so that's been my mission from the start, and that's been my objective, and that's kind of been a journey for me as well, because as we're aware, I do not represent a large chunk of the audiences that I want to help change the business landscape, not for, because that's very white savior. I mean, I want to change the business landscape so everyone feels like they've got a place in it. So
So,
that's
sorry, I was just gonna
go
ask,
on.
so when you're creating, so when you're thinking of content
Yeah, yeah,
and you're thinking of creating for those individuals that you don't necessarily have the lived experience for,
yeah,
what comes, how does that vision board appear? Because I'm guessing you can't look at your competitors marketing and be like, okay, we're going to steal some of this and do a little bit of, which is the traditional route. You know, you look at your competitors and then you differentiate how you want to be slightly different or slightly similar to what they're doing.
yeah.
Where are you pulling from?
I'll be honest with you. I
Yeah.
wish I was that strategic with my own marketing.
Let's admit it. We say it, we advise clients, and then we're just like fudge cakes just everywhere.
I can advise people as like till I'm blue in the face and it will work. Like my strategies work for other people, and I know who my audience is. I know what my objectives are, and I know what kind of content I need to produce. But honestly, I think mainly in the way that I talk about Wild on the website. It's more about the copywriting and the things that I say than, yes, the imagery is great and that's really important, to show people how brilliant our community is and like what's available and who I am. That's fine, but actually the way I talk about Wild on the website especially, I'm very, very clear that we are not welcoming. You are never allowed anywhere near Wild if you're a TERF, trans exclusionary radical feminist, for those who don't know what a TERF is. Like, no way are you allowed anywhere near us. We're inclusive, we're intersectional, and we welcome women and non-binary people. But also what I talk about is how Wild is here for you, is always here for you, and you can come as you are. And I talk to people and you've seen me talk to people within the community. This week I really went off on like my how I felt about business and, you know, my thoughts, which can go anywhere, but
many ways.
generally it's from a lot of personal growth and learning. So I don't share stuff until I'm comfortable with, you know, that I've done the research to make sure that I am using the right language and that I am representing people in the appropriate way. And I think the difference with Wild is, like, for example, when we first started, when I first opened Wild, it was a physical co-working space, and I described it as a co-working space for people who identified as a woman, right? And woman had an X where the A is.
That was a thing that was going around for a while.
Yeah, that was at the time appropriate. And that was kind of the language that was used. And I have lots of friends who are part of the trans community, and so I spoke to them about certain ways that I was talking about who can use the space, that kind of thing, the language. I did my research and that was correct at the time. Then I noticed changes, I did my research again, I understood like the kind of phrasing that I needed to use. I think that's the difference, is that it wasn't performative. It's just part of what Wild is that I'm also always open to being wrong, and I think that's where we've spoken about that a lot in the past as well, you and I. That's where people go wrong, bizarrely, is when they're afraid to go wrong. So then they don't try at all, and they don't like look into how they can be more inclusive. And I'm not saying like Wild is not like 10 out of 10 inclusive or, you know, accessible, but my objective is always that, and whatever budget I've got, I'll do as much as I can within my means in terms of, like, you know, making things accessible. There's free stuff you can do, like making sure all our in-person meetups are on step-free level, and explain exactly where we are, who they can expect to see. Like, there's loads of ways for it to feel inclusive.
But I think one of the main things you're mentioning, though, is you have full control of the tone of voice.
Yeah.
And that's where it's so fascinating, because for most big organizations, the focus tends to be on imagery. But I guess something I didn't even consider with a personal brand, the imagery is you, it is what you have access to, is who you turn up to. But the tone of voice is where you have the most creativity to represent.
Yeah.
I also love what you said around you updated it as it goes. The thing about inclusive language is that it does change with the times. And I don't know if I would, I don't know how to phrase it, but, and obviously you didn't do this in this manner, but the user research you did by asking your friends, it's like, here's a form, but, and having access to individuals who are different from you seem to influence all of those changes. And it's just fascinating now that I'm thinking about looking at your marketing, and I highly recommend individuals to go look at it, how much the tone of voice probably plays more into it than I suspect.
Yeah.
because when you think personal brand, you think person.
Yeah.
But I guess once people look at you, they like you, then they go onto the website, and then the website content and the tone of voice you have there probably reassures any kind of biases they have about what you or the club might be like.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. I think that makes such a huge difference. And it's really subtle things that people probably don't notice, and I certainly don't anymore, because it's like, well, I do make a conscious effort to make sure that I am using the correct language if I'm talking about something specific. But for example, if I'm talking to everyone in the WhatsApp group, I won't say good morning ladies, I'll say good morning everyone. Or I'll say wonderful people, not wonderful women. Yes, we use women because it is for women as well. Like it can be inclusive and specific at the same time, but it's those kind of like subtleties that make people feel really included. That's the difference. And I think when I like, sometimes I offer like free chats if someone wants to have a chat about what Wild is and whether it's right for them, and I'm really upfront about what Wild is and what Wild isn't, and I have that on the website as well. You know, I talk very openly and confidently about what Wild is and who isn't welcome, and what that does is turn off the right people, and it brings in the right people.
There's exclusion and inclusion.
Yeah, I want to exclude those TERFs. I want to exclude people that are happily racist or ableist or ageist. Basically, it stops people from applying. When I use that language and it touches a nerve, it's unlikely that they'll come into. Well, that's what I'm hoping. I don't want anyone horrible
coming in. I'm curious to know, with using intentionally inclusive language in the majority and all of your content, as far as I can see, how does that have an impact when you do have people that stumble upon your content? Because we can't control who sees it.
Yeah.
So when you do have people who are not your target audience,
yeah,
because a lot of people I speak to, they have a sense of fear of using inclusion language because they might not use it right, they might not use it. But there's the other side of it where when you do use things like women with X, I remember for a client, we used that and people started commenting that you're erasing women and da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, you're not our target audience, go away. But how do you tend to engage and react when you have that situation on your content, if you have it?
Thankfully, I haven't had it for a while, but I definitely have had it. When we first opened, I was a target for what's that really prevalent TERF campaign where they've put billboards up about what is a real woman. They've like, I can't remember what they're called, but she came for me and basically just launched an attack at our content and at me in the DMs. And I kind of, at first I was like, oh, crikey, what on earth is going on? Because it's never nice if someone comes for you, you know, like whether they're horrible or not. But it was a massive lesson in me knowing that this is absolutely needed. What she did was the opposite of what she was hoping to do. She actually reaffirmed to me that how important it is to have these safe spaces, because people like her exist and they want to erase trans people, they want to erase and quite literally that's how they talk. And so I was like, no, let's have a conversation. And I knew what she wanted. She wanted an argument, and I wasn't going to give it to her because she already knows what I'm going to say, right? So I just, whenever that comes, I haven't had it for a long, long time, thankfully. But if I do ever have anyone kind of questioning what Wild is, or like, as in not in a good way, I just treat it with grace, to be honest. And if they disrespect or they're horrible to me, I'll block them. But generally I'll have a conversation because it helps me learn too. I think a lot of the time when you are in a bubble and like the way that algorithms, or however you want to describe it, you become part of this bubble, right? And I'm in a lovely wild bubble that I have to actively step outside of and seek out, for example, like the awful GB News or whatever it's called, that horrible news outlet.
Do you
Because
watch it?
yeah, no, I don't watch it. I don't watch it. But
Oh.
if someone shares like one of my like socialist channels or that I follow shares like a tag of that news channel's Instagram, for example, I'll go and watch a bit, because I think it's so important to see how people are talking about issues in the world, and what still needs to, as in like what I still need to work on in order to change stuff, and what language is being used and how I can tackle that, and how I can change the world. Because how am I going to know what needs changing if I don't break out of my bubble?
You
If
have
I
to
stay in
delve
my
into,
bubble,
yeah.
if I stay in my bubble, I'm going to think, oh, job done. I'm not going to carry on. And that, I honestly think that that's why bubbles are created, because then there's no conflict, right? And conflict means change. And so for me, going to like forcing, I went to a really corporate networking thing the other day, and I was like, oh my god, I hate it. But it was important for me to see that, because I felt out of place again, and I felt nervous and sick, and like no one was very friendly, and I was like, well, it still needs changing then. So
And
you
that still
have to,
gives you, that's continuing to define what your USP and what makes Wild special. Like if you, and I agree so much, like if you stay too much in your own world, and maybe one day society catches up to the way that, not catches up to us, like we're 10 miles ahead, but things change. Maybe,
yeah,
all networking events change, and then people can't differentiate what the difference is.
yeah,
That again, I'm classing it all as user research.
yeah.
It's all competitor research and user research, but it's a good way to stay attached to what's happening, the viewpoints, and to make sure you're excluding the people you intend to.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's a big mistake that people, well, I don't know if it's a mistake, or that not all communities like ours actually want to affect change, whereas I do. And so that comes into everything that I do. Like, am I making people feel comfortable? Am I encouraging them to turn up as they are? And that means, on our goal setting session, that means keep your camera off if you want, keep your mic off, turn up in your pajamas, have a cry if you want. Because the amount of times I've worked in toxic corporate environments where I've, God forbid, shown some emotion and been made to feel like I'm not good enough at my job because I've got emotion. Whereas in my opinion, as a self-employed person, we can use all of that to create businesses that are way better than all these like faceless corporations. So why not allow people to have space to feel safe as they are, and turn up completely as themselves? That's the change. That's where the change comes from.
Where do you think? Because I had an interesting challenge the other day around. So essentially what I'm interpreting is about being authentic, being your full self
Yeah,
in all aspects. But there's an element that's happening, especially in personal brands and marketing, where authenticity is kind of getting faked, where, sometimes they forget to cut the camera too soon when they're crying, or they're organizing scripts of arguments, or they're making up fake things when clients didn't pay them.
yeah,
How, because I know you don't do any of those things, but there's also an element of when you're being yourself, that is part of life. Like I know I've seen a
yeah,
couple of your reels where you're talking about the stresses of just running a business.
yeah.
How do you balance? I don't know what the opposing thing to it is. I guess being fake authentic to real authentic. Do you get what I'm trying to say? How
Yeah.
do you balance how that might be perceived?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think I just give less of a shit.
Fair.
Like if someone thinks it's fake and I know it's not, that's fine. You crack on. I'm not going to fake anything. I'll just be completely myself, which is also my downfall in a lot of the time. Because I don't like batch content. I don't like think, oh, I know, I'll talk about this in this month. I'll talk about, I know that I've got memberships opening next week, for example, so I'll make sure there's information about that. There's like a schedule for what's coming up this month, that kind of thing. But when it's me and like my stories and reels, quite often I've recorded that reel 10 seconds before I posted it because I felt like talking about it.
Are you the only one doing your content?
Yeah. I think that makes such a difference, and I do think that there's like, it's that small economy thing. Like, that's the challenge for me, is making sure the community still feels intimate and that everyone has access to me, bizarrely, as the founder, because ultimately I'm the one that's like talking about what I want to do and what Wild is, and people are signing up because they like what I talk about. And so often I've joined communities where you join and you expect to meet the founder, and then you're like, oh,
you get 2 seconds of them and then they disappear.
Yeah, they've gone, and I don't want that to happen. That's the balance in authenticity for me, is that like I always want to show up authentically in Wild as well as outside, in public, and that means that my energy is not sustainable a lot of the time. So strategically, it's not brilliant, but I prefer to be completely myself and for growth to be slightly slower, which I'm not sure it makes a huge amount of difference, rather than create content just for content's sake, because it always falls on flat ears, in my opinion, anyway.
So the slow growth is a new aspect of business as well, but I'm curious to know, because you making content in that manner, and again, we know better as people who consult marketing, we encourage people to get schedulers and do all these things, but I guess your two options would be getting someone to help you with the content and / or introducing another face to the brand. The introducing another face one is the one I want to kind of explore, because that, as a personal brand, introduce another cast, because I call it a cast because we watch YouTube and we see these things and we kind of forget people are real people until we meet them. But introduce another face, another member to your cast. How do you think you'd go about really getting across the brand tone of voice, really getting across all of these things that are somewhat instilled in you and you've portrayed onto the business, and now they're kind of one of the same, but scalability wise, if you wanted to bring someone else in?
So Paulina is our community coordinator, and she's kind of part of the business regularly. She helps me behind the scenes, but she also runs sessions and like she shows up, answers questions, works with in-house coaches, that kind of thing. So she's kind of part of our team page. She's a freelancer within her own right. She's not employed by me as in PAYE, but I pay her on a retainer because of that scale of, I need to scale the business. That's what you do with a business. But she has been a member since I opened the doors for the trial, right? So I opened the doors physically in our co-working space as a like open day. She was the first one through the door, and she was like, oh my god, I'm so happy you've opened this, and really got wild. She still does. She brings a totally different type of energy to me, which I think is also really important for a community, because not everyone needs to relate to me, which is fine. There's lots of different people that like what I'm about, but maybe could do with someone else's point of view on something, which I think is really good. Again, I think you have to be just really careful with who you work with, and as the business owner of a purpose-led business, like I've got that wrong before in terms of someone working for me, like in a VA capacity. It just wasn't right, but I wouldn't bring them into the community until I was absolutely happy that they wouldn't like offend anyone, which is, basic. But two, that they know how to look after a space and how to keep it safe. And that's the key thing at Wild, is that yes, we are primarily a business network, and so whoever works within that, me or Paulina or whoever else might come in to like run sessions or coaches, that kind of thing, they have to believe in the Wild mission. They have to believe in what we stand for. And again, the way that I talk about it will either put people off or make them go, hell yeah, I want a piece of that action. I believe in what you're talking about. And I think because it is such a strong, like, as in, like, it's very clear what we're about, it's easier in that sense. It's
to hire,
easier to find the people that believe it. Whereas if you're like a business network and you haven't really got, like, you've got a team and like you just want to bring people in to make money and blah blah blah, and it's quite general, then it on one hand it might be easier because you don't have to worry too much about whether someone's going to keep it safe or not, but also it's quite hard because then you can't really align your team with your brand. So I think it's easier for me to find the right people that align with what Wild stands for. But scaling that, absolutely, it's something that I'm thinking about at the moment. Like, how would I bring more people in so that we could, because ultimately one of my objectives is to help as many women and non-binary people in the UK, and actually loads of people in the US want to be part of it. But how am I going to scale that? But keep the same values and the mission alive and make sure nobody feels unsafe? Because ultimately, then if that happens, we become the oppressor, and that's not what I'm doing that. That's why when I see like businesses grow super duper quickly, and it's a personal brand, I always like, one, how are they doing that? And two, how long is it going to last? Like,
growing at that scale,
is that sustainable, or are they going to have a huge turnover of members? Because like I've had members of Wild since 2019 and we're 2023 now. That's a long time for a membership to have members, and I think that just goes to show how safe and comfortable and how seen and how heard people feel at Wild.
So indulge me for a moment.
Yeah, go on.
Let's say, I'm not going to put a time on it, but let's say Wild goes international.
International, baby. Well, we have had one member from LA, I'll have you know.
But international to the point where you need a marketing team of at least like 5 people in each country or region that it's in.
Yeah.
What would your brand guideline, tone of voice stuff look like to explain? I want to go with to explain the tone of voice. Like, how are you crafting this inclusive tone of voice and writing it on paper for someone who may not meet you to understand?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think honestly, what would have to come first is what's important to the community. So basing it on rather than like when I'm communicating, if I'm doing your scenario, so if I'm talking to a marketing team, they probably already know about like Wild, like what Wild is, but in terms of like how to communicate to potential new audiences, yes, there's the basic like Wild is this, Jess is this, blah blah blah, but the tone of voice needs to make people feel safe, represented, heard, seen, included, as in however you turn up, you're welcome, like you're welcome at Wild. And I think then going deeper into that, for them to spend time in the community would be like non-negotiable. They would have to understand what it's like to be in there, right? They have to. People that are doing my marketing now are members.
Ooh, you're beating the capitalist in me, because what I'm hearing is that you've got a new hire, and they say on average a new hire takes like what, 3 months to be beneficial.
Yeah.
I feel like you're adding another month to that.
That's okay. Why does it have to be fast? It's not been fast so far.
Fair.
And how much growth does one need? How much money does one need? You know, I think there's a limit, and I think I talk about this book a lot, Beautiful Small Economy, or whatever it's called. Small is beautiful, something like that. And that talks about how there's a point where it tips over into not intimate anymore. Like you lose all the values, the way the staff feel, the way the company runs. It tips over into Amazon, which is a machine. No one gives a shit about anyone. It makes money. Done.
So, instead of a probation period, I guess it would be 4 months of cultural not indoctrination, but indoctrination is the word I'm thinking of.
Yeah, because we are a cult.
But
I do.
No, it's not a cult. Legal disclaimer: Wild Coworking is not a cult. I do think that's interesting as a concept where there's a separate month of just pure in the community before you are as an employee. Like I'm thinking if I was coming on as a copywriter for Wild and I know the brand and knowing a brand externally and then you're going into working for them, you have a level of expectations. You're probably thinking, we've had this with clients before, where we see their stuff and we're thinking, oh my God, they probably have all the brand guidelines. They're probably really on top of it. Then we go in there and we're like, this is a shit show.
Yeah.
It's on fire.
They're like, we put the logo on everything in the bottom right-hand corner. And we've got it on a Word file, not in a PNG or whatever it is.
But you go in and it's a whole different experience. But when you go in, you're expected to reduce content and produce these things instantly. And I'm kind of liking this idea of there being an element of community engagement in your first month to really understand the tone of voice, really dive in there. And then I don't like the word probation, but then your probation starts.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Okay, so I'm joining the Wild team. I'm in Texas, and my first month is just all Wild everything. I go to all the sessions, I meet all the community, I go to just all Wild everything. I wear the merch every day.
I love how the view of Wild for you is massive. I am living for that. You're like,
listen,
yes, it's all over the world. We've got merch.
If we are going to the extremes of shifting the networking tone and the networking vibe and fully influencing it, we need to combat the leggings and $50, 10-pound lattes. So therefore, we need to be in spaces to give people options. And see, I've already started using the royal we because
you're coming along for the ride whether you like it or not.
I need to rock up anywhere in the world and find a Wild. But I also love envisioning this because it is that double-edged coin when it comes to inclusive language, where when people start it themselves, they don't think about scaling it. And then when they scale it, they don't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
So the fact that thus far, you're having people come on board from the community, they have a base understanding, and then you're adding to that rather than completely from scratch.
Yeah. And it's quite hard at the moment in terms of like, if Paulina's writing something for me, I have to, not very often, but I might have to edit it. And I think sometimes when you do want to be like this inclusive space and I want to be kind, I want to treat everyone with respect, of course, I'm always like, do you mind if I just change? But I'm confident with what our tone of voice needs to be. And so that needs to be very clear. There's, I think what I'm trying to get at is that even though they would have like a month, I love that I'm living in this scenario now, even though they would have this like month of getting to know the business and like that affects change as well, right? The way that we would do that is got to change from within. It can't be like, yeah, we're going to change this over here, but we'll still function like a normal office and we'll still function like the normal corporate, toxic, awful places. Like, no, I'd rather not have anything going on than become the issue. But there's still levels to that like I would still want to be seeing the creative, and I'd still want to be involved in social media. I don't want to hand all of that over because then it becomes something else. However, like maybe from all my lessons that I'm learning, maybe I create something new and that becomes like more of a team approach to a community or whatever. But as wild as it is at the moment, I just love spending time working, like in Wild. I created it because I had the issue of feeling alone, and now I've got like a load of lovely people around me who get what it's like to be a woman in business, but also, yeah, kind of has the same view of the world as me. Not completely the same, that would be weird. But as in, you know, we don't have TERFs, which, you know, is a bonus. But yeah, I think it's the same. If you're going to scale the business, you're going to bring people in, I would treat them just as I do with members, is that I talk a lot about what we're about, and if someone doesn't like that, then they're unlikely to apply for a job. And I would like to think that I'd end up surrounding myself with managers who really truly believe in Wild and in me. I think that's the challenge I think you quite often have with team members, as if it's a personal brand, but they don't believe in you and what you're trying to do.
They can't market for it.
You're screwed, because you can't trust them either. Like you need someone to be like, why don't you ask Jess to do that? Or like Jess would know the answer to that. If they're like, you know, everyone in Wild and everyone that works in Wild would mention each other's name in a room of opportunities, and that's the type of team that I would want to create as well. Like there's collaboration over competition, because I'm rubbish at, I'm not even competitive with myself.
Well, I'm gonna shift that for our game.
Okay.
We're gonna make a campaign inclusive.
Okay.
And now I'm thinking your favorite, I'm being very sarcastic right now because people who are listening are not looking at my face. Your favorite social platform. LinkedIn.
Oh,
actually,
this is useful because, yeah, go on.
Okay, your favorite social platform, LinkedIn, wants to do a partnership campaign with Wild. And it has to incorporate both brand values and it has to give both vibes. Or you have the option to, let's see. I'm trying to think of a completely, well, I'll give you another Wild version. Okay. You have the option to launch Wild in Texas.
Okay. Right, so I can choose either LinkedIn or Texas.
Yeah.
I love that you think I hate LinkedIn that much. And I do. I'm tempted by Texas.
Have you been to Texas, by the way? I just picked a random state in America.
Yeah, no, I think Queer Eye is filmed there.
All of our education on Texas is based on Queer Eye. I love it. Are you going Texas or are you going LinkedIn? You don't know? LinkedIn, okay.
Yeah, okay. LinkedIn. Because it would be good for me.
All right, okay.
It would be a challenge. It would be out of my comfort zone, and it would be really good for the business because it makes sense for me to be there. But I'm getting a pain here from talking about it.
Oh gosh. All right. So scenario, LinkedIn has approached you and they're saying, hey, we want a brief to show how our partnership has come together. Like LinkedIn sponsored Wild and they want to be like, yes, LinkedIn and Wild have come together. We want a brief. It can be, I'll give you the option to do a newsletter, any format you want, or it can be video.
Okay.
What are you pitching and how are you making LinkedIn feel more inclusive?
Yeah, so I think that, oh God, all the ideas want to burst out of my brain. I can't even talk. I would love LinkedIn to want to do a campaign with Wild. Even though I hate LinkedIn, I would absolutely love it because I'm not the only one that feels like this about LinkedIn and that is missing out on opportunities because LinkedIn feels like a corporate environment that we've escaped. It just does feel like that. And everything that people tell me and talk to me about when we're talking about LinkedIn, they say exactly the same as me, where they're like, it just feels like a stuffy office full of awful people in suits that aren't listening to me. They're all just talking about themselves. And let's be honest, that kind of is what LinkedIn is. So what I would love to do, and LinkedIn, if you're listening, this is my pitch to you. LinkedIn and Wild should work together to change the business landscape via the virtual online office, which is LinkedIn, and it is awful, but Wild will inject a vibrancy, inclusivity, a safe space, somewhere to have fun, and somewhere to talk about business without the fear of judgment. Because I think that's the main issue with LinkedIn, is that people are terrified of saying what they think about themselves, their business, other businesses, because everybody judges everyone so much on there. Whereas if you're going to talk about it on Instagram, you know that either someone's going to scroll past because they can't be bothered, or they've looked at the pretty picture and they're not that bothered about reading. Whereas LinkedIn, you have to have this opinion. How about we forget about the opinions and we forget about the judgment, and we just have fun talking about ourselves without judgment, our businesses, celebrating how brilliant business can be if we just turn up as ourselves.
Okay. Mic drop. I've imagined it. The virtually wild office.
Way
Sponsored by
better than
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Basically, Wild is a better version of LinkedIn.
No, we're not going to say that. The virtually wild
What?
office, sponsored
Yeah.
by LinkedIn, where mistakes are welcome. We laugh, we smile, we turn up in our pajamas, but we get shit done when we feel like.
Yeah, we're just completely ourselves, however that is on that day.
I was avoiding saying authentically selves or turn up as yourself, because I was like, maybe that's leaning too much into the thingy voice. But we can even add a tech element on it and be
Go
like
on.
virtually wild in VR or AR. One of the R's. I
Why
forget.
have you suddenly turned into a Dairy Milk advert? Like this.
It's my campaign voice. Is when I start imagining it.
So sultry.
When I start imagining it, I literally start seeing it in
Oh
my head.
God, VR.
And I have imagined you walking in, the
Right.
shot is on you, and you're in a suit.
Right.
All right. Your
Yeah.
suit, you got your glasses on
Mm.
and hairpin back, everything.
Mm.
And then you look to this dude, he's in a suit, he's grey. And then you spin back to camera,
Yeah.
you roll your eyes, you
Yeah.
rip the suit off, and
Right.
you kind of step in to the VR AR space, and
Right.
everyone's laughing.
There's comfy sofas. It feels like I'm rebranding at the moment, and the kind of brief that I've gone for is a modern day Mad Men, but women are in charge, because it needs to feel soft and smoky and comfortable, but powerful and musky, and like not blue and shiny and silver and white.
So all those colors are banned.
Yeah.
So you step in and it's soft,
Mm.
but there's these sprinkles of business everywhere. So
Right.
there's a screen and there's a spreadsheet on it. But people are
Right.
laughing. Why is there a spreadsheet on the screen? They're doing finance. And then there's a coffee machine. Sorry, I get really serious about my campaign brief.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm just laughing at, is the coffee machine is the is a coffee machine business to you?
Yes.
Okay. Just
Can you tell I've never worked in corporate? A coffee machine and a water
it's
cooler.
like a bloody coffee machine in corporate. You get granulated bloody coffee and a kettle.
Right. How
Sorry, go on.
how far cozy do you want to go? Is there going to be a shot that pans on yoga in an office? Or are we not doing that?
Why? Why?
Okay,
As in,
okay,
like, that's weird. No, or like, oh look, that's how you can do. No,
okay. We'll cut the yoga. The yoga's not included. But
because we're veering into leggings and lattes.
see, it's infiltrated my brain. I can't see, and that's where the coffee machine. So we're sticking with you roll your eyes to camera,
Right,
walk away from this dude, rip off the suit, step
right.
into the wild virtual co-working space.
Yeah,
Everything is bright, colorful, but people are working but smiling, but not cheesy smiling.
yeah.
Um, there are people laughing, and we pan to the board and we're like, what they're laughing at, thinking that they're just watching something funny, but it's actually like they're talking finance. They're talking,
Right.
there's a business element, but it's not serious.
Okay.
Um, and then we pull back out, and across the screen it says something like, working can be wild. You don't have to do it alone.
Nice.
Hmm? Hmm?
Yeah,
Okay,
love
okay.
it.
I like And obviously we sprinkle in a diverse bunch of people. That's that element.
In. No, we represent who is actually this is what a CEO looks like. Anybody.
Okay. I'm sorry. With campaigns, I do think of it as a sprinkle. And sometimes people don't. They do. I like to start in the mindset of it being a sprinkle of people because it means that, you might have a bunch of things versus the other way when it's too rigid a call for people, they then go, oh shit, we need a Black person now. And it's like, that doesn't feel,
yeah.
sprinkle
Oh,
feels a little
there's
bit
a Black
chaotic.
person. There's someone with a hearing aid. There's a wheelchair.
Yep, like tick, tick, tick.
Yeah, those are normally the three, aren't they? Yeah, no, I mean, I love it. There we go. LinkedIn, give me a call. I promise I'll start using you at some point.
I love how this podcast is becoming a secret call out for all the jobs we want. Oh, thank you so much for joining me, Jess. This has been amazing. It's so beautiful to hear the intersections and how your content and marketing represents the community you've built. Let the people know where they can find you on the internet.
Best place to go is on either the website, which is wildcoworking.com, or Instagram, again, Wild Coworking. There I turn up as myself, obviously, as opposed to pretend me. But I'm there all the time on Instagram, pretty much. And the website is a really good place to just find out about all different aspects of Wild. So like the membership, but also the advanced business support, why I started it, about our members, all of that. Website's probably best, I guess. Yeah.
Fantastic. We'll have all those links in the description or wherever you're listening/watching the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us and continue to make marketing inclusive.